Crackdown on crime with KIMA News.
This is KIMA. Now Yakima's most experienced news team. TJ Close, Heidi O'Malley, and no wait weather from Stu Seibel. This is KIMA's Newsbeat at 6.
Good evening. Bail is set at $25,000 for a Yakima woman accused of stabbing her husband to death Friday night.
32-year-old Luann Bowen made a preliminary court appearance this morning, and as Newsbeat's Mike Malman reports, the couple had a history of domestic problems.
Friday night, Luann Bowen flagged down a sheriff's deputy on B Street to report her husband was injured. When authorities got to the couple's 6th Street apartment, they found 37-year-old Jim Bowen bleeding from a stab wound to the neck. He died a short time later. A knife was recovered near the spot where Mrs. Bowen made initial contact with authorities. It wasn't the first time Luann Bowen had contacted police. The couple appears to have a history of domestic problems.
Just a preliminary check of our record shows that there has been some domestic problems between these two before. I don't know the extent of anything other than argument and possible misdemeanor assaults. There was no felony type situations.
In November, Luann Bowen went to court to get a domestic violence protection order against her husband, who she says had threatened to kill her. In a signed statement, she said, quote, "I am afraid for my life, as he has threatened me that if I should leave, he would find me and beat me and kill me." Mrs. Bowen invoked her right to an attorney Friday night. She said very little to authorities, and it is unclear if there is any allegation of abuse before the killing.
She complained of no injuries at that time, and she didn't have any visible injuries.
Charges have not been filed against Bowen. She is scheduled to be arraigned Wednesday. In Yakima, Mike Malman reporting for Newsbeat.
Meanwhile, the victim of a Wapato homicide died of massive internal injuries inflicted by a blunt object. But a coroner's report released today says it's too early to tell if 38-year-old Agnes Lara had been raped. Lara was found badly beaten 3:30 Friday morning in the Apis Gowdy housing complex. She died later at a Yakima hospital. Authorities say it appears Lara had been raped, but the coroner's office says they will need results from toxicology tests before they can tell if she was actually sexually assaulted. The FBI reports no arrests have been made, but they are actively investigating the case. They would not release suspect information. Yakima County may have to raise landfill rates next year to cover the cost of cleaning up pesticide contamination at the Terrace Heights landfill. Public Works Director Dan Hesse says reserve funds are now being used to cover the cost, which may reach $300,000. The hazardous material is being placed in containers for shipment to an incineration plant in Utah.
I believe that we've recovered about 95 cubic yards of krenite contaminated soil east of the landfill in Terrace Heights. We believe this is about halfway through the quantity that exists out there, and that we'll have another couple weeks of removal of material before we're through. We are funding this out of a reserve account in the solid waste division at this time, but we're essentially borrowing the money, and we will have to replace it. It will be a factor in the next rate increase, probably for 1995.
Hesse says rates may have to be raised 7 to 10% next year to cover those cleanup costs. The first shipment of hazardous material from the landfill is scheduled for tomorrow.
An indoor air quality study is being requested for Yakima Fire Station Number 1. Fire dispatchers and 911 operators are located in the basement of the building, and employees there have reported headaches, sore throats, and general malaise. Deputy Chief Gene Martin says the study will focus on the building's ventilation system.
The Viricon company will come in and monitor the air with special monitors. They'll look at the heating system and cooling systems and the ductwork to make sure that we don't have bacterias or that type of thing in it. Another possibility down there is that with all the electrical equipment running down there all the time, that we may have ozone may be part of the factor down there. And he will test for that, and he's indicated if that's the case, it'll be fairly easy to fix.
The indoor air quality study is to be completed quickly at a cost not to exceed $2,200. So the Come On Newsbeat, a Yakima councilman goes to the nation's capital to fight for local jobs and loses.
And residents of a Northwest city cry foul over the U.S. Army's plan to burn toxic chemicals in their community.
KIMA's Newsbeat at 6 continues.
Suicide has been a topic widely discussed in the U.S. media lately.
For a time, the national spotlight was focused on the death of Seattle grunge rock star Kurt Cobain. While here at home, people are still coping with the suicide of well-known Yakima resident Greg Stelzer. Mental health professionals remind us what to look for if a loved one is contemplating ending his or her life.
I think it's important for us to talk about the issue of suicide is the idea of looking for solutions. And most people are looking for solutions to their pain.
Sometimes there is no warning, but often there are signals we can pick up on. Some of those are if there's recently been a suicide in the family, if the person is talking about killing themselves, maybe they've experienced a significant loss lately, and they're showing a change in attitude. And sometimes giving away personal belongings is that person's way of expressing he or she still wants to live.
If we're aware of some of those signals, we can start saying, you know, I'm noticing this and this and this about you. Are you thinking about ending your life, or are you giving up on life? And that's a way to open some conversation and let them know you care.
I think people's reaction is they want to kind of talk them out of it, and what they need to do is just be real empathic, listen.
Professionals say publicity about suicide is rarely responsible for someone else making the same decision, but it can trigger already suicidal thoughts, as in the case of a friend of Greg Stelzer's.
There was a connection there that obviously the other person had that in their mind, and the fact that their friend had completed the act makes that seem possible.
Teenagers sometimes give more obvious signals than adults, and it's not always possible to intervene.
Some people don't give off a lot of clues. Some people don't give off any clues that you would recognize as clues until afterward.
We can't feel, responsible. I mean, it's a decision that the individual made. We can't second guess.
And support groups are helpful for those left behind. If there are signals, remember the most important thing is to listen and to get help.
Ultimately, we can't control what somebody else does with their life. But again, we need to remind ourselves in terms of dealing with people in the future, most people, if they're giving off signals, they're giving off signals because that's the part of them that wants to live.
An open line is an important resource for anyone in crisis. That number is 575-4200.
Well, instead of being held in detention, some Yakima juvenile offenders may soon be wearing electronic anklets, which would allow them to move around more freely. The anklets are part of a youth crime prevention effort. The program, called Project Opportunity, hopes to use the anklets as tracking devices. Juvenile offenders would wear the anklets 24 hours and would have to remain near a phone at home or school. If accepted, the anklet program would save Yakima County needed dollars. Right now, it costs $50 to $60 a day to keep a juvenile offender in detention. The anklet system would cost $30 less.
We have them in Yakima County for adult offenders, but especially where we are short on space, I think this would be a great way to keep track of a juvenile offender. It's a lot less expensive also than putting them in the detention hall.
And if okayed, the anklet system could go into effect in 1 to 2 months. A 2-year investigation into an ongoing series of cockfights culminated in the arrest of over 60 people and the seizure of $30,000 in cash this past weekend near Mattawa. Grant County Sheriff's deputies closed in on an apple orchard yesterday afternoon to find more than 100 people betting on a cockfight. Those apprehended include people from Yakima, the Tri-Cities, and Seattle. More than 20 dead cocks were seized, along with a number of live cocks, betting slips, and a large amount of cash. Racketeering charges may be filed against those who held the cockfight.
A dozen people have been arrested by the FBI for allegedly conspiring to cheat and defraud the Lummi tribal-operated casino in Bellingham. Arrests were made yesterday in Bellingham, El Paso, Texas, Las Vegas, San Jose, Sacramento, and in Anderson, California. All are casino employees. They are accused of using a sophisticated system of marking playing cards used for blackjack games. The suspects also are alleged to have obtained and removed unused playing cards from the casino, arranging them to be marked or returned to the casino's blackjack tables. Yakima City Councilman Ling Buchanan says the Federal Aviation Administration is standing firm when it comes to radar for the Yakima Airport. Buchanan has just returned from Washington, D.C., where he met with federal officials and members of Washington State's congressional delegation. Buchanan is fighting government efforts to monitor Yakima radar from Pasco. Buchanan says it will be much more expensive than doing the job from the Yakima control tower.
One of their papers says that the fact that we have less traffic right now means that we will be downgraded. Another one says when they pull the people out of the tower will be downgraded. This is in spite of the fact that both an FAA study and the airport master plan show that traffic will be increasing at the Yakima Airport to the point that they will need to do a modification of the tower.
Buchanan says the FAA has agreed to hold a meeting in Yakima to discuss the radar situation with local governmental officials. No date has been set for that meeting.
Summer-like weather coming a little early.
Really? You bet. You know, we've had temperatures 20 degrees in some cases above normal for this time of year. So if you like your temperatures a little bit cooler, yeah, right. Stick around tomorrow. It'll start to cool down a little bit, but still it's going to stay above normal. Pollen count really taking off again. Lilac is the main source of pollen. The mold spores still holding about even. We'll have the forecast and those changes coming up next.
Now back to Newsbeat at 6 on KIMA.
This portion of tonight's news is brought to you by your Lincoln Mercury dealers.
Good evening. Getting a little buildup of cumulus here and there across the Cascades and the west sides of Washington and Oregon may result in a chance of a shower or thunder shower this evening. Otherwise, partly cloudy, a low temperature about 48 in Yakima. Then for tomorrow, partly sunny skies with a high temperature a little bit cooler, making it up to 74. But that's still well above normal for this time of year. It's mostly partly cloudy across the area for the most part. 82 degrees right now in Yakima, 78 at Ellensburg, 83 at Toppenish, 85 at Sunnyside, and Grandview with 83 degrees. Our winds are southeasterly at 6, humidity 83%. We have a falling barometer. The high temperature for the day today coming in at a very warm 83 degrees. The normal for this date, only 64. Low this morning cooled down to 56. Some of the other highs and lows in Ellensburg, 79. Their low this morning was down to 50. 86 for the high at Toppenish and Sunnyside, as well as Grandview. In the central part of the state, the warmest reading this afternoon was an 88-degree reading, and that was at Hanford. And that was a record high for the date for them, as well as the warmest reading in the state of Washington. 84 in the Tri-Cities, 86 degrees over at the Dalles, and some cloudiness beginning to build in from a southwesterly flow that's developing across the Pacific Northwest. A little bit of shower activity and isolated thunder shower activity around northwestern Oregon, southwestern Washington. Most of that activity is moving to the northeast, according to radar. 71 for the high at Seattle today, showers around there. 75 at Portland, 75 degrees at Spokane, and even warm up in the Cascades. Up at Stampede Pass, the high was 65 this afternoon. High pressure over the west was responsible for giving us that very warm southerly airflow, but now that high is drifting on to the east. That's allowing this low pressure system off Vancouver Island to circulate a rather weak front across the area. That'll be setting in motion more of a southwesterly flow of air across the area. It'll mean a return to temperatures that'll be a little bit cooler, but still, they're going to be a little bit above normal for this time of year. The forecast is next. Tonight, around a 30% chance of an evening shower or thunder shower, otherwise partly cloudy and a low of 48. Tomorrow all day, it's going to be partly sunny at 8:53 degrees. At noon, warming up to a reading of 64, and the high temperature tomorrow should be near 74. Then tomorrow night, it'll be partly cloudy with a low of 45. The rest of the week, a little bit unsettled. May see a chance for an April shower toward the weekend. Wednesday and Thursday, partly cloudy. Friday and Saturday, we'll see a chance of showers. Highs will be in the 70s. That's still going to be above normal.
Okay, nice and warm.
Taking a look at news from around the Northwest tonight, a 23-year-old Oregon man who knowingly spread the AIDS virus has been sentenced to 69 years in prison. Timothy Hinkhouse exposed 3 sex partners as well as a child he was convicted of molesting to HIV. A court decision favoring the timber industry will be appealed by the Clinton administration. The government will ask a higher court to overturn the ruling, which held that the destruction of a species habitat is not one of the activities prohibited by the Endangered Species Act.
One of the biggest stockpiles of chemical weapons in the country is slated to be destroyed by fire. But although the U.S. Army has approved the plan, they're still finding a lot of opposition from the citizens around the depot in Umatilla, Oregon. Katie Eldridge reports.
Now it's a horrifying situation that we have to try to deal with, and we have to deal with it responsibly.
12% of the nation's chemical munitions are stored in cement igloos at the Umatilla Army Depot. Under a worldwide treaty, the weapons must be destroyed by the year 2004. The Army wants to meet that deadline by using an incinerator. Karen Jones is with the Chemical Weapons Working Group. She says there is no way to know the possible health risks of incineration.
Many of the effluents coming out of the stacks have never been identified. We're estimating that only approximately 10% have been identified. Of the ones that have been identified, we know that dioxins and furans will be coming out of the stack. Both of those are bioaccumulative and biomagnified. That means as they move through the food chain, that their toxicity will increase.
But the U.S. Army is recommending the method as safe and environmentally sound.
We're definitely going to put the carbon filter system, which is going to make a safe system even safer.
The incineration project will cost $900 million. The Army already has incinerators operating at other chemical weapon sites, one of which had a live agent release last month.
The incinerator at JCADS has certainly proven to be unreliable and unsafe. As recently as March 1994, they had a release of GB that was 18 times over the permit limit.
The release that you are referring to would never have happened here in the United States. The mechanics of the incinerator were changed, and the addition of carbon filters would preclude any release such as this in the United States.
Local residents will have 60 days to comment on the incineration plan. Then it will be up to Congress to decide how these will be destroyed. I'm Katie Eldridge reporting for Newsbeat.
The Yakima Indian Nation will be using an unconventional fish rearing pond this year, a nuclear reactor water basin. The Yakimas are starting to install 14 net pens this week that will hold 500,000 Chinook fingerlings. The fish are scheduled to be put in the 6 million gallon basin in early May and will be released into the Columbia River in June. Still to come on Newsbeat.
Everybody knows homework can be tough to get around to, but we'll take you to a university classroom where homework is really a bear.
KIMA's Newsbeat at 6 continues.
5 course records fell today at the Boston Marathon. Under ideal conditions, more than 9,100 runners were officially entered in the annual race. Kenya's Cosmos Naditi won the men's division for the second year in a row with a record time of 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 15 seconds. Mexico's Andres Espinoza was second. German Uta Pippig took the women's division in a record time of 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 45 seconds. And Bob Kempinen of Minneapolis finished 7th and set an American record of 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 47 seconds. Jean Driscoll captured the women's wheelchair race for the 5th straight time, 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 22 seconds.
Heidi, 2 named pro quarterbacks were signed today by NFL clubs. The Washington Redskins inked John Freeze to a 1-year pact. The former San Diego Charger QB will earn $900,000 next season. And the Atlanta Falcons re-signed Bobby Hebert. He will make considerably less than the $3.5 million he earned under his old contract. And there are 45 applicants for the vacant men's basketball coaching job at Whitman College in Walla Walla. And one of those applicants is Jerry Coaster of Redmond High School. Since 1988, Coaster's teams have finished 3rd or higher in state competition, winning the state AAA titles in 1988 and 89.
And stay tuned to KIMA for Newsbeat tonight at 11.
Michelle Bingle joins us now live from the newsroom to tell us what's upcoming. Michelle.
Thanks, TJ and Heidi. With all the concern about being physically fit and watching what you eat, tonight we'll have a recipe for chocolate chip cookies for you that will melt in your mouth, but believe it or not, they're good for you. And now that spring is in full force, so is baseball. Tonight at 11, how a backyard workshop is turning out the best bats around. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Thank you, Michelle. The Prosser rancher who was convicted of several counts of animal neglect in 1992 was back in court today to face new charges. Gladys Tarnowski faces 2 new counts of animal neglect stemming from the 1992 incident. The judge denied Tarnowski's request that the case be dismissed, and tomorrow will begin consideration of Tarnowski's appeal on the original charges.
Finally tonight, remember when you were in school, homework could really be a handful at times. Now at Washington State University, some students have a class that's a real bear, literally. April Zepeda shows us how a couple of bears are spicing up homework at the university.
Teddy and Bongo belong to a South Dakota company that will eventually sell them to a zoo or a private owner. But in the meantime, the students of WSU's wildlife nutrition class are raising them with the help of their teacher.
In that course, we talk about taking care of orphaned animals, and most of the students at one time or another will encounter an orphan that they have to take care of. And the bear cubs are a good example of that.
The baby bears spend their days just outside Dr. Robbins' office, getting plenty of attention from visitors who get to see real-life teddy bears up close. But at the end of the day,
we take them home. They're just so cute, and you just can't get enough of holding them and seeing them play, and it's something that you know you'll never get to do again.
30 students take turns babysitting these two handfuls who not only chew everything, but need to be fed every 4 hours.
I've never had a baby, but I would guess that's about what it's like. They just sort of wake you up because they're really loud. As you probably have heard, they'll just kind of scream just like a baby, and they'll wake you up, and you do wake up.
But as with any job, there are rewards, and fortunately, breaks.
Boy, they must be a handful.
Classroom curriculum has changed since I was in school.
It's a lot easier to give my son a bottle than give those cubs,
I would imagine so.
That's it for us tonight. Have a good evening.
Good night.